Yes, thank you. This is Adon Katz. I'm the platform curator of the Artificial Intelligence platform at the World Economic Forum, part of the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which now is a network that originated in San Francisco, but now has offices all over the world in Colombia, Rwanda, South Africa, Brazil, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and elsewhere. I am very interested in the development of these topics in the technology policy area. I've worked in this area for a long time, and I'm curious to hear our panelists. And if we could start with Dr. Mikhail Nogueir, founder of the Artificial Intelligence Finance Institute.
Yes, I'm the founder of Artificial Intelligence Finance Institute, a US-based institute that our purpose is to train finance people, computer scientists on the challenges and opportunities on artificial intelligence in finance. So we have plenty of new methodologies, techniques that are very interesting to be used in finance, and at the same time we have lots of challenges in terms of obviously the supervisors, the ethical aspects, bias aspects, and so on and so forth. So in order to do that, we have the best lecturers on machine learning in finance, I would say all over the world. We have also very interesting advisory board panel. We also, I'm also a visiting researcher at NYU Quran in New York. I previously taught at Columbia University, also collaborating with Cornell. And I have 20 years experience on different aspects of finance, mostly buy side, asset management, but also risk management, always dealing with quantitative modeling aspects. Right? I have a PhD on mathematical finance from the University in Madrid, and yeah, I'm very happy to be here and share these very exciting times for the world and for finance, for artificial intelligence.
Miguel, if you could answer, what do you think the impact on the data, meaning that's been derived from the AI algorithms post COVID-19? What insights do we have about the challenges ahead in regards to artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so I think it's a very interesting moment because it's a very challenging moment for artificial intelligence researchers, practitioners, business analytics, data analytics users all over the world, in the sense that we were all some sort of making our algorithms learn with historical data sets which contain information about consumers, information about finance flows, and so on. And all of a sudden, obviously, everything changed with COVID-19, and some sort of an unexpected, unknown event is still hitting us. And at the same time, it's some sort of for artificial intelligence researchers, it's as well as for epidemiologists, it's a big challenge because there's still small data in order to understand what's going to be the impact long-term, short-term, mid-term, right? So, and also it's a very interesting time to show and to discuss with the different audiences the limits of any big data artificial intelligence model, right? Which we're seeing now, obviously. That also affects humans, by the way, because also humans deciding now on marketing, sales, strategy in all companies all over the world need to consider all these aspects, right? And they have no previous experience. And yeah, I think this is a very interesting moment to introduce and so on. We also have, right, what we're seeing is it's a huge flow of very good research, right, on the artificial, if you look at reinforcement learning, if you obviously lots of advances in natural language processing, right, deep learning. So we're seeing some sort of a lot of efforts being done all over the world into bringing up new technologies. And this hasn't stopped, right? You still see, right, that conferences, AI conference, still get thousands, tens of thousands of submissions, which is, so I would say in terms of research interest, there's a very healthy flow of people working very hard to solve very different problems. And I would say also that maybe one interesting thing, obviously, that it's more of finance related would be obviously the ethical aspects, fairness aspects, and transparency aspects in which the society, but also regulators, right, are pushing hard in the sense of, yes, you banks, financial institutions, you can use AI, machine learning, but you should go beyond some sort of the usual, right? We some sort of optimize a loss function, we get a loss function, and then we're very happy, and so on and so forth. But we also need to deliver transparency. We need to deliver fairness. So I think it's a very interesting moment because all these factors, right, right now are hitting us at the same time, right? So it's
Great. Well, thanks for those initial thoughts. Some questions I see already starting with the chat, and you're encouraged to submit more. But I see we have Mr. Patrick Bankert on. If you could please introduce yourself from Samsung.
Yeah. Hi. Good morning, everybody. Patrick is my name. I'm sorry for being slightly late. There was a scheduling conflict. I am in charge of the AI department at Samsung SDS. My own background is as a mathematician. So I did my PhD in machine learning many years ago, and then spent some 15 years applying it to the process industry, oil and gas, chemicals, power generation. And I'm now in charge of the AI department at Samsung SDS. You'll probably know Samsung as a company that makes mobile phones and TVs and such. SDS is the IT company. So we run the data centers and write the software for the group. And there's a number of AI initiatives that we pursue, particularly on the training side, so to speed up the training process of AI models.
So we've started, we got initial reflections on just a general question of what the impact of COVID-19 has been on, we've heard to some extent on the financial sector, as well as in regards to research. There's a question in the chat in regards to adoption by government. Do you have any initial thoughts you could share with us?
Well, I think, a number of industries have seen some really dire straits through COVID. I think anything that's related to digitization, the use of the internet, and artificial intelligence has really seen a boost rather than a depression, because now that everybody is stuck at home, everybody uses technologies like we're doing right now on Zoom. That all has been lifted. So it's become clear that using digital technologies overall is a good thing. And not only during COVID times. So personally, I think our experience now is a step change. We will not be going back to the normal, even after we have a vaccine or a treatment plan in place. This work from home is going to become the new normal, as well as working more and more digitally. And AI is an enabling technology over many, many different sectors and use cases to allow that to happen. Part of it, of course, is natural language processing. Just recently, a new model, GPT-3, was released, which can offer a bunch of functionality and user interactivity, either the computer providing some answers or interacting with you to fulfill simple assistant type capabilities. We're familiar with AI recommender systems. If you go to Netflix, it tells you what movies to watch. If you go to Amazon, it tells you what stuff to buy. You go to Google, it tells you which websites to go to. All of those are AI systems. And the usage of these systems will only increase because we're more and more reliant on digital technologies.
So I would ask both of the panelists if we can now talk about possibly the risks. We've opened up the opportunities. It's an incredible time. I come at these issues from the perspective of policy, and there's a lot of discussion about AI ethics and AI ethics principles and how they'll be implemented. And so I'm wondering if you have any sense. I guess we'll start with Mikhail in regards to what the risks are. You mentioned a little bit that some of them, a lot of this is unknown. So
yeah, so basically, right, the use of artificial intelligence algorithms, right, in finance, right, it's obviously, right, very useful in terms of, right, measuring risk better, understanding the clients better, being able to track them better. It obviously raises lots of questions as to whether credit models are being fair, credit models are being inclusive, credit models are being transparent, so that you can some sort of explain why you some sort of denied a loan, why you gave it, and what differences finance from other industries is that finance, for example, banks are obviously heavily regulated. So so regulators are putting a lot of effort into some sort of, so artificial intelligence developers in banks have some sort of extra fences to jump in order to implement their models, which are good in the sense that, again, they're pushing the developers, they're pushing the modelers, right? So to some sort of consider and factor in, again, fairness, inclusiveness, and so on and so forth. So this is, right, I think, a very important development. There's also many other aspects that now that we have access to huge amounts of data in financial institutions, so obviously about privacy. Privacy is a big deal. Banks have access to a huge amount of information, right? And supervisors are asking, the fact that you know everything, the fact that you're able to build networks to understand human relationships. So who's your son's friends, right? What the schools they're attending, and so on and so forth. So this amount, so to which extent all this information should be used in order to offer, and so on and so on and so forth. And obviously other questions like how far you need to go in terms of historical analysis. So I think that now regulators, right, banks and customers, right, are living in unprecedented times because of the transparency institutions have. Transparency in the sense that they know everything. So, and regulators need to make sure, and we all need to make sure that this is done properly and safely, and for our society.
Thank you. I'll turn to Patrick and asking you described the process now of working from home, the very tangible process of people spending more time working remotely and working in a digital context. Do you see such a dramatic change as was just described in regards to the challenges and risks ahead?
I do. So I agree with everything that Miguel said. There are a few more challenges, I think. So beyond the explainable AI, which Miguel went into, where you have to explain why the AI system denied a loan, I think that's a major point going forward. Another one, of course, is cybersecurity. To what extent can you prevent people from stealing your digital identity and doing things in your name, in your identity that you never intended? Then there is an ethics / bias problem. So we know that a number of AI models are biased, not because the algorithm or the mathematics is biased, but because the data on which the model was trained is biased. So an instance is facial recognition software. is much more accurate on Caucasian faces than on African origin faces. That's a fact. That's not the fault of the image processing algorithm. It's a fact of the database on which that system is based. So there is an ethics problem that goes not only through image type problems, but through language type, NLP type situations where you do get that, translation systems are like Google Translate are heavily biased towards the English language as opposed to other languages in the world, simply because the corpus is bigger. So you get that representation challenge as well. Then you have a number of systems that produce fakes. So they're known mostly, I think, under the title GAN, Generative Adversarial Networks, that can generate images or videos based on certain things. So for example, I could take a photo of Einstein's face, feed it to a GAN network, add my own audio to it, and then the GAN will transform his face into speaking like I do. So I can produce a video where Einstein is talking, but he's talking what I'm saying. So I can do this in politics. If I want to make a known politician say something really bad or really different, I can produce a video like this. So that causes a lot of problems and has potential in the near future to really influence political elections and other kind of public forums. So yes, there are risks.
Absolutely, and thank you. I wanted to bring those two things that you said together in regards to whether it's evenly distributed, the way that this change is affecting everyone, and whether or not what we should do about the fact that some people, it is not as easily accessible to be working from home and being on Zoom, and having, especially when we're talking internationally, reliable video internet access bandwidth. Miguel, can you help us think through what we should do about this, or how to even start thinking about it?
There's several things here. One is we're on one side we're living in an era in which we can really democratize the knowledge of AI. So I think on that side, so the fact that we're teaching lots of courses, there's a lot of materials, and some sort of students all over the world can sort of use convolutional neural networks, RNN, so can use NLP from their homes and learn how it works. That's on one side. So in terms of knowledge, but obviously there are the fact that the data and the privacy and the computer power needed to perform some of the computations. This is obviously raised a lot of concerns in terms of concentration of concentration of data, concentration of knowledge. The fact that the governments can know with absolute precision what citizens are doing. Companies can do with lots of precision what workers are doing. This is pretty frightening, right? In the sense that the fact that we now have these tools of complete knowledge of what people is doing, it can really be misused by governments, by companies, by people having access to this information. So it's really needed a very important debate. And you mentioned it, Patrick, around face recognition is obviously a big deal, right? But there are many others. Privacy, right? It's a very important aspect that democracies and citizens need to fight. Otherwise, all our information is out there. Everybody knows what we're doing this afternoon. Everybody knows what we did yesterday. And this is pretty frightening if it can obviously be misused. So the privacy, access to information. So I think it needs much more. I don't like regulation, but it obviously requires much more thought about how we're going to control these things. Otherwise, we can have a dystopia, right? Really being controlled by whoever. And
right,
this is really an imminent risk. I'm not saying this is going to happen in 5 to 10 years. This is an imminent risk of governments or big organizations really having access to lots of information about us.
So I'll turn to Patrick and ask whether there's any aspect of this that can be dealt with at the level of technology, the extent to which companies and their best practices play a role, eventually the extent to which regulation may come. My organization, my platform, we just put out a set of 10 recommendations for government procurement officials when they purchase and integrate AI, what they should think about in putting in their RFP. So that's the context from which I come. If you could comment on the level at which technology plays a role, business practice, and government.
Yeah, I mean, this is, of course, a difficult thing because technologies like AI lives on the internet. And if any one country or a group of countries attempt to regulate it, there will always be other countries in the world that do not regulate it, or at least not in the same fashion. And you can simply move the server to that other country. So you would then have to institute policies like China is doing to actually block entire websites or entire server structures to prevent the population from access to that system. So I think regulation is problematic, not because it shouldn't be done, but enforcing it is a problem. And this is something that's been found. Recently the European governments got together and invented this new privacy GDPR system that is unique to Europe, and to some extent companies have decided to circumvent or ignore that because the rest of the world doesn't follow. So that's a challenge, really. If you want to regulate the internet or AI, you need to get everybody on board, and what extent that's possible, not so sure. We are currently in a state where it is governments and corporations that own most of the data out there about us as individual consumers, as well as other companies and governments. And for better or for worse, that is in the hands of a rather small number of governments and companies. Obviously, the Silicon Valley, where I work, is particularly known for a data density. And there are not very many companies that own the majority of that data. So it's really those companies that one needs to look towards for a data governance type strategy. To what extent can you force them to do things differently? That's going to be a challenge. But I agree with Miguel that this is it's an imminent problem. I would maybe make it even more extreme that to some extent we've been living with this problem for several years already without a proper solution.
I'll take up one of the questions that was in the chat and encourage others to do so. But Miguel, what is the government's role in this? What is the responsibility at this point and in the future?
Yeah, well, of course, governments have some sort of the responsibility to some extent to some sort of have, as Parik was saying, so a set of laws that some sort of protect us against abuse or protect us against, right? So, and you correctly alluded to GDPR as one attempt to regulate privacy and so on. So I think governments that are still not probably right moving fast to the technology because they're slow-moving organization as governments. There's a huge opportunity to digitalize more. There's a huge opportunity to give a better service, right? And they're trying to some sort of trying to infuse at least to financial institutions. Right, this idea of transparency and so on and so forth. But as Patrick was saying, I think instead of governments, we need some sort of global regulation instead of there's been this week in Europe several scandals because secret services of European countries, some sort of hacking phones, right? So this is right, obviously not new in the sense, but we would say that this is even easier than ever, right? So governments also need to stick to very strict rules on how they use, right, their power, on how they use the information they have and how they use, right? So there's a lot to do, and governments might be looking the other side just because, these companies are very powerful, but also because they cannot themselves be doing things that they don't want regulation or global regulations to be, right, like face recognition and all that stuff. So the citizens of the world, right, so to speak, and maybe other organizations like with World Economic Forum or others should be, right, really raising the voice, saying we really need protection. Citizens really need better protection of their privacy, their rights, and the use of our information. And just to maybe, Tim Cook was saying last year, right? Tim Cook was saying maybe we need to centralize the information. Maybe we need a central agency. Maybe we need an agency, right? And Elon Musk was also alluding that when we have problems that create a lot of conflicts, maybe we need to create an agency that some sort of centralizes the information that we have, our information, and then we know when we can control who has our information, who gets money out of our information. So an agency that are the kind of organizations that deal with these things like nuclear powers and that also some sort of, maybe we need something like that, somebody neutral that some sort of tries to guide this very important issue globally.
Thank you. And so returning back to the first question about is COVID, how big a difference does it make? There's been some emerging framing of the issues that we've heard at the World Economic Forum describing this period as the Great Reset. And I think of the different ways in which things are reset to their original settings and the way in which things change. And so again, I both hear an indication that things need to dramatically change. There's been dramatic impacts on people's lives. On the artificial intelligence side, in terms of the data, in terms of the science, do you think this is a huge moment in change?
Yeah, it certainly is because AI is under huge criticism in the sense, well, it's under fair criticism, or your models didn't, right? For example, finance, right? I don't know, asset managers have been, right, saying, okay, you didn't see this coming, or governments, you didn't see this coming. You have all these algorithms, all these technologies, and you can some sort of see lots of things from your population, and you were very surprised, and you didn't. Right. So as I said at the beginning, I think AI is as good as and algorithms are as good as some sort of the information we have about the different processes. If you have an unknown hitting you, right, there's very little you can do. So it also can be seen as an example of the limits, right, of the artificial intelligence model in order to deal with unexpected environments, unexpected things, right? So this is clearly, right, maybe healthy in that sense, right? That I was telling last week to some of our delegates, some students on an AI course, that our responsibility is also to tell the users the limits of our models. And the limits of our models are certainly around, if there's a big change in the data, see, if world has changed, chances are that our models will know we're well, right? Maybe yes, maybe we're lucky, but chances are, so we should emphasize always the limits of a changing world. And AI cannot some sort of, doesn't have a crystal ball to say, this is going to happen next month, right? AI don't know either, right? What could happen next month.
If I can jump in at this point and say, yes, of course, AI is under criticism, and we need to explain our models definitely. On the other hand, though, in recent times, also AI has seen a lot of hype. AI has received a lot of praise. There has been tremendous progress, I think, on a number of issues in AI, where models are getting better, more encompassing. And so AI is a field that is getting better at a very, very fast rate. And it's being adopted into both business to business as well as business to consumer use cases at an increasing rate. So I think we will all interact with AI systems more often. They will become ever more usable and ever more stable. So that's an ongoing trend. And I think to your question, Edan, yes, I think COVID has accelerated that process simply because people are now relying a little bit more on AI systems because everybody is kind of remote. And, if I can put it like this, there has been some degree of resistance among higher level management in a lot of companies. People who come and were educated in a time when there was no internet now are starting to realize, hey, guess what? We can run an organization with 100,000 employees from our living room. It actually works. Beforehand, people thought this was a myth or a lie. Now they realize that it works, and AI enables this on a number of different levels. And so COVID has made everyone realize that, yes, AI has its limits, and yes, we can criticize it for those limits, but it also has very legitimate uses that actually work in everyday scenario. And so they adopt them. So I'm very much hoping that this acceleration and this change is a step change that will stay with us even beyond a resolution of COVID.
I agree. Just a second. I really agree with the idea that many companies, right, you just can't process so much information with humans, right? Think about text, or think about, you alluded to NLP. So I think the potential of NLP, it's because in this huge lake of information and social media and emails from clients, etc., right, is where artificial intelligence, some sort of, will see its potential clearly, right? Because algorithms need to take over. Clients want to do things fast, when fast responses, when they interact with a company, and that can and marketing needs to react to the changes in consumer behaviors very fast, and this is basically algorithms that are taking over more and more decisions, analytics, and now it's text analytics, and as you said, I think NLP potential of transforming even more our society is just imminent. It's not something that, right, we'll see in a decade. It's something that we'll see these machines getting better and much better, and putting in front of us very challenging, even more challenging problems, in order to, how do we, right? But this is a very exciting time, again, because the progress has been huge, right, in the last 2-3 years, right, and that has accelerated just because of digitalization and the amount of data available and deep learning.
I wanted to get back to what organizations are doing specifically. Patrick gave the image of executives figuring out that working from home can actually work. If you can guide us through some other ways in which organizations are changing their behavior, their processes, the way that they do things in this period.
Well, there are many examples on small cases. So I'll give one quick one that comes to mind. So when we used to sign contracts, the general method was to print this out on paper, collect everybody in a room, and actually sign it. Then there was a sort of transition period where you would print it, sign it, scan it, email it to somebody else. They would print it, sign it, scan it again, and then the legal department would print that, and hopefully it's still readable at this point, and it would get filed away. Nowadays, you have digital signature capability, where you send a PDF document around to everybody, they stamp it with their digital signature. That means that the document never gets printed, so we're not destroying trees. The document is fully legible at all times because it's digital. And the signature is, first of all, completely legally valid. A scanned signature, by the way, is not fully legal, certainly not in all countries. But a digital stamped signature is legal, and it's completely traceable to you who have done that. So it's more legally defensible, it's more secure, it's more environmentally friendly. So here's just one very tiny example of this working. Another is, again, natural language processing. Through talking to my laptop, I can do things like write documents, schedule appointments, book plane tickets, even purchase items on a website. So natural language processing can take care of very simple-minded kind of secretarial tasks that previously I had to do manually, or I had to have somebody else to do it for me. So generally automation has gotten a lot better. Then there are other technologies, blockchain being one, where again, through things like smart contracts and so on, that are on a distributed, publicly accessible system, are just much, much more secure than anything that was available previously. So traceability of who paid for what, who received what good in return, and so on, has not gotten much more secure. So organizations have changed by adopting these technologies all over the place. And there are dozens and dozens of use cases like this, where a small thing got exchanged or transformed by essentially a software system.
Mikhail, I wanted to give you the opportunity to answer the same question in terms of organizations and how they can and do adapt and change, and what people should be doing now.
Yeah, so I think basically, right, banking organizations that saw the potential of big data AI a couple of years ago, right, they started to some sort of say, okay, let's have everything organized in a data lake. So let's have all the information tidied, right? They have all the information in a vast data set, right? And then let's throw some algorithms to it in order to do, right, a massive amount of things. So basically, right, so banking organizations, right, can automate things, some sort of improve analytics and improve reporting. And when you say analytics, it can be something like, right, you can have as we said before, using algorithms, right, some sort of a incredible precision in terms of, for example, house income prediction. So you can know basically these days very well what is the economic activity in the Fifth Avenue in New York or in a street in Paris, because you triangulate information from different sources. Banks or retail companies are actually not have some sort of a very detailed knowledge of their customers, right? Where they live, where they go, how much time do they spend in their shops, and so on and so forth. So in terms of consumer knowledge and prediction, right? So the companies are and that has its risk, but it hasn't unprecedented, right? And you never had so much information, and you never knew how to process it, and now you know, right? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is again, text analytics, the fact that you can some sort of now run your algorithms through thousands of emails and know the mood of your clients, you know, the satisfaction of your clients. You can also track social media. So and you can even rate, right, the customers, churn path models, and so on and so forth. And in terms of and the next step is that we haven't seen yet models that are prescriptive, in the sense that now we can some sort of describe very well what my clients did last year, how much did they spend, the shops they were, everything, right? Everything, right? And now the next step is some sort of doing more things like reinforcement learning. So thinking, okay, so now I need to decide on this information. So I think here the potential in the future for organization is some sort of also make algorithms like reinforcement learning algorithms go one step more and say, what should we do now with this particular client, with this particular lady living in Maryland that has been doing this and that has this money in the account, that she has come to the branch twice, so on and so forth. What should I do next, right? So being prescriptive is something that the algorithms, right? But measuring, aggregating information, measuring risk, so you have much more capabilities than ever, right? And that's in that sense, right, a very important aspect, right? And there's also can be seen on the other side. You can also see these algorithms turning up against you in order to use fraud, in order to do fraud, money laundering, and so on and so forth. So, right, yeah. So cybersecurity and trying to catch up with other AIs on the other side being as clever as yours, obviously trying to gain you. So this is, yeah.
So for those of us who haven't accomplished a PhD in artificial intelligence or running a big wing of a multinational corporation, what can we do to prepare in continuous learning for how our jobs are going to be changed? What can we do now? How can we learn? How can we adapt that will help us as jobs change?
Excellent question. But this is again where the internet is here to help. So the people watching this video right now are doing exactly that in some sense. And if you're interested in the details, there is a heap of courses that is available on the internet. YouTube, of course, is a perfect location where this is free of charge. There are other websites where there is a small charge. So again, you can talk about, you know, you having to have a certain amount of disposable income to be able to do that. You need to have an internet connection. You need to have a computer to access this information. But if you have that basic access, the internet has a huge amount of learning resources for AI, both in terms of documents like books, as well as video courses, as well as software guided courses where you can learn. If you're interested in the actual details of it, you can learn programming languages. Python is currently the most popular one in AI. There are courses on that. If you're interested a little bit more on the mathematics side, there is, of course, a vast literature available. Each of the programs that are out there, there's numerous AI platforms. They all usually have a light version, so a free of charge version that you can download from the provider's website and try out. So does ours, Brightix AI Studio. And you can just play around with these things, and it doesn't cost you any money, but it costs you time. So the one thing that you do have to invest is intellectual curiosity and your free time, but the resources are out there. So if you're interested, go and do that. If you need data sets, there are lots and lots of data sets available, again, free of charge on the internet. Kaggle is a website where people compete against each other. It's usually more or less academic, so you can even download the data sets of past competitions that are already over. So depending on what you're interested in, you can participate. very timely, there is a data set on lung x-rays of COVID patients. So if you wanted to do a study that's relevant to the COVID pandemic right now, the data sets are out there, the tools are out there, you can go and contribute towards this effort.
I see in the chat we've asked if Mikhail can start for some book recommendations in this topic. Where should people start?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, we ourselves offer a course for financial practitioners, so you can look at it, artificial intelligence, financeinstitute.com. But in terms of books, right? So I think that the best book, right, but this is obviously personal choice, right? But I think there's a book called Hands-On Machine Learning with Keras, TensorFlow, Scikit-learn by Aurélien Geron, second edition. I think it's a pretty awesome book in order to not only know superficially, but know in detail, see the code, and so on. So one of the things we've learned with AI is that courses needed to be very hands-on. People is not willing just to know equation and stuff, but it's just willing to be able to use models, right? So if we're looking into finance, right, there are a couple of new books, Machine Learning in Finance by Matthew Dixon, Igor Halperin, and Paul Billicon, which is good. Also, Marcos Lopez has some books, Machine Learning for Asset Managers. So there's a gap. There's obviously a research gap in terms of all these techniques or some of these algorithms so new, so to speak, that the researchers, instructors, we're catching up, trying to say, oh, how these things work in that particular context, right? Because one thing that we always some sort of, so one of the learnings that our students get from the different courses we teach at universities, etc., is that context is very important for AIs. For language is certainly very important context. Your deep learning might be working very well in one context, in another. You might be using XGBoost or some other stuff, right? So okay. Having said that, it's also very interesting that these books are useful. Not only for computer scientists, but also finance people, physicists, right? Literally anybody that's modeling out there needs to be looking at AI books because of So as a recap, so Hands-On Machine Learning with Keras, TensorFlow with Aurélien Geron, right? And Machine Learning in Finance with Matthew Dixon, Igor Halperin, and also Marcos Lopez has a couple of books. We had a book that we wrote 2 years ago with Tony Guida. It's called Big Data Machine Learning. So at least in finance, right? And now again, depending on your domain knowledge, right? So it's also important what you said. So about it, I don't think we all need now to turn into computer scientists. There's always space for domain experts, in the sense that, if AI in healthcare is going to have a big impact and hopefully very positive, but you always need to have, right, domain expertise. Somebody say, oh, we think that the algorithm has correctly been trained. We think that the algorithm has been shown the relevant set of examples. As you were saying, Patrick, I think the domain experts are the ones we need to make sure that the algorithm has been correctly, right, that you see what I mean, the data set and so on and so forth. So think about the limits. Again, I don't want to just, but we saw the limits of big data in 2016 with the previous elections, right? And it was a simple problem. The simple problem was, sometimes it's very hard from a sample to generalize to the population, but sometimes asking people, several people, is not enough to know what everybody is going to do. Right. So there are right. But yeah, I think that probably these books are
that's great.
Are the ones that.
So Patrick, in addition to books, I was going to give you the opportunity of how you keep up with all the developments. If there's any mailing list or website, in addition to your book recommendations, that you think are worthwhile following?
I particularly enjoy a lot, even if there's a lot of noise, is Twitter, right? If you correctly choose the folks, right, I think you can get a sense of where's the boss, right? As Patrick was mentioning, so everybody now that is in part of the community, right, has been hearing all the GPT-3 boss, right? And it was basically, right, LinkedIn is slower in the sense that obviously information and people is showing things, right? Trying to
Patrick, do you also use Twitter? Are you into Twitter and LinkedIn?
I'm active on LinkedIn. I do not use Twitter. I think LinkedIn is a great resource. If you subscribe to the right sort of groups in LinkedIn, you'll get literally bombarded with AI news on a daily basis. And because LinkedIn and Twitter are linked, it's slower indeed, like Mikhail says, but you'll end up with the news anyway. And people will post their articles and other people's articles, and there is more there than you can possibly read in any one day. I did want to get back to a couple of things that Miguel mentioned. So domain expertise, it cannot be overemphasized how important that is. If you simply have a data set and some AI scientists, the outcome will generally be pretty bad. It is essential to have domain experts be part of the team to make a model that's going to be any good at solving a practical problem. So if you want to contribute towards the AI effort, you don't necessarily need to become a Python programmer or a machine learner who knows how to code up a neural network. If you're a domain expert in your field and can help machine learners to represent your field correctly, then you'll probably actually have a larger impact on the effort than if you were to learn how to code up a neural net. In terms of books, I do want to recommend one book. It doesn't show up properly. It's called The Master Algorithm by Pedro Domingos. It's a much more sort of basic book, but everybody who wants to kind of get a good introduction to the field and get an overview over all the possible directions that have been taken, that is a really good book. It has to be mentioned, of course, artificial intelligence is about 70 to 80 years old by now. So some avenues have been explored extremely thoroughly, and that book will give you a good overview of many of them.
Well, I'm not sure how we're doing on time. Are there other questions from the audience here? And if I could get some guidance on how much time is left.
We are good on time. We can take audience questions, and after taking all the audience questions, we can wrap it up.
Can people unmute themselves to ask a question, or?
If they raise hand, we can ask to unmute, or we can allow them to speak. But better, I think we can read the questions from chat box or the question answer window.
Maybe just to mention, right, there's obviously a bunch of different very good books. Well, we obviously all started with one book called Artificial Intelligence, Modern Approach by Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig. It was some sort of probably the foundational book on artificial intelligence. I think at some point you should read it, right? Even if you're interested more on the coding and the details on the last model, obviously books have a hard time, updating because but I think this is an essential book, Artificial Intelligence: A Modern Approach by Stuart Russell and Peter Norvig, the 4th edition. So this is obviously a good that it's worth reading. It's very good. And these were some of the founding fathers of the field, right?
Yes. We have a question for Patrick from Ankit Mehrotra. What's the future of domain consultants in AI?
Well, I mean, I think it's a bright future because that is essential. And I think it's become visible to both the companies that create AI models as well as those that consume it, that you need to have a team effort where you have both the data scientists or machine learners as well as the domain experts advising. I think part of it is sort of quote unquote advice and consulting, but a large part of it is what's called data labeling. So when you want to train an AI model, you have to supply it with data. That typically is raw data to begin with. It could be audio recordings, images, videos, text. It could be tables of numbers. And that data then needs to be sorted out. One of the first things to do is data cleansing. So normal data that you don't want to have, data that does not represent the situation, needs to be removed. And only an expert in the field is capable of identifying what is unwanted and abnormal. So you need them for this. Then typically labels need to be added in the sense of this is the piece of data that we really want to pay attention to. Or if you want to classify things into categories, which is often necessary, then you need somebody to label, well, this piece of data belongs to category A and this belongs to category B, and only a domain expert would know that. So actually right now there are quite a few companies that have grown very large in the last couple of years that do nothing but outsource data labeling. It's a human task, but it is essential to underpin the later training of AI models. I personally spent a long time in oil and gas and chemicals, and there getting the people who know how to run the equipment, who've been to the fields, is absolutely essential to get the models to reflect the real life situation, because there you're being drowned out by data that represents the normal good condition, but what you actually want to model is the abnormal failure conditions, which might occur 1% of the time. So you need a domain expert to point you to the right times and the right locations to recognize what you want among this stream of normality that you're not really concerned with. So long-winded answer to say, I think that's where a large job growth is going to happen in the near future, is domain expert consulting to AI.
I'm going to take up a couple questions and combine them. We have someone specifically asking, they have a master's in as a software engineer, and they're thinking of doing a master's in AI. Is that a good idea? And I'm combining it from the micro to the question, what do you think the future of data science is?
Well, this is you really need to think about obviously your career path going on. If you want to do what I see in the market is that in order to have a job as a machine learning engineer, right, in companies, I think you don't need a PhD in artificial intelligence, right? You need a PhD in artificial intelligence. Obviously, you want to do research, you want to publish papers, and you want to some sort of right. But with a master of AI, I think it's enough, right? What you said about big data, I think we cannot. I think AI. So AI is here partly because we have big data, and AI needs big data. So I'm not sure if there is a distinction between big data and AI, in the sense that we've been mentioning NLP, right? NLP is a very it's very intensive, right? In terms of the data you need in order to perform tasks is obviously huge. The more data you have, your models are going to be more robust, and so on and so forth. So I think AI is partly here because of big data. We're going to have, with Internet of Things, more data than ever. We have more satellites, more sensors, right? More microphones, more cameras. So I think big data is only going to grow, right? And we should put it the limits, and we discussed that, right? But I think that both things are basically right. So we cannot think about algorithm working well without good data, a large enough data, a sample that is representative of the population, and so on and so forth. So I don't think there's AI engineers, right, need to put a lot of effort also with domain experts, so what you said, Patrick, to make sure that the data is good, the data is enough, the data contains all the relevant edge cases. Think about cars. So one of the issues about autonomous cars is having the edge cases. So you mentioned that. So you need catastrophic events from which you want to learn, right? Domain experts obviously can tell you a bunch of them because, right, if you have an experienced driver, he certainly or she certainly have lived through some edge cases, right? But yeah, data and AI, I think it's part of the same framework. We want to model things. We need data in order to, right, learn and act and have more robustness in our models. Right, so we can call it big data, we can call it AI, but AI well done needs a lot of data. The more, the better, quality data, etc.
And it should be emphasized that data is where the work lies. AI is a largely automated computer program driven part of the whole workflow. It's the getting the data, preparing it, cleaning it, labeling it, making sure it's correct and ethical and unbiased and all of those things. That's where the human man hours lie. And that's why data science will continue to grow together with AI, probably at an even higher pace, because that's where the work is. So in terms of jobs, yes, that's great. So just a quick answer, if you're a software engineer thinking about masters in AI, yes, do it.
Do we have any other questions? Other than the question about a number for someone to hack ethically and criminally, which is not advisable to answer as a lawyer, are there any other questions? How to become a domain expert?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you're a lawyer. You're a domain expert on law, right? So I think I don't know if you're a biologist, you're the domain expert. So the thing is, you want to do something in one specific field, right? Healthcare or biology or law or finance, right? So this is, but I don't know. It's hard to say why I choose my domain expertise, but it's certainly the set of theoretical rules, the set of knowledge that accompanied with expertise on a particular field that, as we said, might help a lot a team of data scientists to at least avoid serious mistakes, right? To at least avoid clear things. And then there's another thing, is that domain experts often help debugging AI's systems that some sort of did mistakes, right? And then the domain experts say, aha, this is what the AI was wrong. It was this specific combination of things that happened, right? Basically confused the algorithm. So now we need to, right, somehow fix that. And domain experts are the well-equipped to say why the misclassification errors, or what went wrong, right? In this.
Yeah, so briefly, you become a domain expert by picking some domain, working in it 10 to 15 years, and then you're an expert.
I was going to turn, since I think we've, there aren't any questions in the chat, I wanted to circle all the way back around to COVID. And is AI going to help us get out of the situation that we're currently in? I'll start with Patrick.
I certainly hope so. I mean, it is helping already in a sense that compared to the Spanish flu epidemic of the 1920s. I think the statistics are available. All of us can go to the internet and look at the statistics of everybody else. So that kind of is a pre-warning system. You know that you live in a dangerous area or not. There are projections that are fairly reliable now because the models are being enhanced. On the treatment side, AI is being used in the attempts to create a vaccine, to create a treatment, to allow earlier and earlier diagnosis of COVID, to help treat those who are in the ICU wards, to look at their medical imaging. So AI is being used all over the place in healthcare, and actively used on the treatment of COVID. So it is being used, it is making a contribution. Whether or not in retrospect, after the fact, we can measure how much that contribution was, I'm not so sure, but it is definitely contributing positively to the effort.
Miguel?
Yeah, I think, right, maybe the question is the opposite. I don't think there's a place in which AI cannot help in that place, because epidemiology is also about predicting where this thing is going to go, right, and what other things you could be doing with it, exploring the potential drug combinations, vaccine combinations. So this is also a combinatorial problem. So there's also the need to track people, right? So if you sum up the amount of things that needed to be done in certain aspects, I think that healthcare, right, is one of the places in which certainly AI is going to have a bigger impact, right? The only problem is that this thing came suddenly, and it's pretty brutal, right? And epidemiologists, like the rest of some sort of people, was lacking data. Right? You just had a few days of data, a few months of data, and it was hard for the models to some sort of predict what's going next, and so on and so forth. So this is essentially a very tricky problem. So, but for the rest, I mean, whenever you see the healthcare space, right, AI can help diagnosis, you said, so everywhere. But you just need time and obviously more data, right, which you don't have. Right, that's why you have to decide. You have, with your intuition, epidemiologists need to say this is going that way, the other way. These things need to be done that way because it worked, right? But we don't have a statistical evidence, right, yet that this could work because we don't have enough data, right? But I think that AI and all the things need to be done, are very useful for healthcare.
Any more questions, Edan?
There's one. When do you think AI will get stabilized?
Never.
I think AI lives in a very changing world, right? Thinking, I always make the analogy of a robot. Thinking about a robot, it can deal with any conditions of pressure, temperature, right? And you see, it's unthinkable, right? So I think that AI is going to get better at understanding unknown environments, right? But for the rest, analyzing things in which we have enough data, right? Digesting large amounts of data, digesting text. This is only going to get better. Right, so many tasks that fulfill these characteristics of stability will clearly be done by algorithms very soon. It's just a question of time, because of what we know. But there are all these other challenges emerging that we need to put a lot of effort, ethics, right, and privacy, and so the challenges on the other side for the society are huge, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done to assure that, the AIs just don't pick weapons and start shooting, right? Because you created a policeman, an AI police, right? That it's not correctly. So there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll take that and answer the question that was asked previously that I think I can address, the question about the deep fakes that were mentioned earlier on. Wouldn't detection, how can bans on things like deep fakes be possible? Wouldn't detection and creation of them constantly be in an arms race where neither side ever wins? I wanted to answer that in line with how how Miguel was just answering, that I think that has a lot to do with intent. That doesn't go away. As far as we understand now in artificial intelligence, intentionality is not a part of the way that the algorithm operates, and so it is the person, and whether or not they're intending to deceive another. There could be ways in which a deepfake is interesting art or commentary, valuable a political input. There are ways in which it can be done where it's clearly not attempting to deceive someone or harm their reputation. And so I think just as Miguel was talking about, it depends on what you do with it. That is why I think there's so much suggestion here to take great care and to look carefully at the data and to monitor the different steps and try to think through all the possible consequences. And though it's an enormously opportune time, also one where we should pay careful attention. Do either of you have anything to add on the deepfakes?
Yeah, I have a comment on that. I think that one of the ways to protect ourselves against that is that we need to some sort of authenticate the video. So the only protection we have, because these deepfakes are only going to get better. These deepfakes at some point are going to be very realistically, they already are. So the only way in which you can protect yourself on not being deepfake is that we somehow need to make sure, right, maybe with blockchain or I don't know, that things are authenticated, so that this video from Patrick Banger has been signed by him. So he says, yes, it was me. I said these things. The rest, I cannot say, because maybe some guys created a video with my face saying silly things. You can only trust some sort of signed videos, right? Because I made sure, you see, I think the only protection that we have against that is that we have to authenticate the content, right? So yes, the content was created by this person, this person, this person, and it's faithful. And is this what they said, right? And this is, otherwise we have no protection. Anybody can create a video with ourselves in this panel saying no matter what, right? And it's going to be very realistic, right? So maybe the protection is we need to some sort of enhance the authorship of videos, of content, to make sure, yes, this was the person that created that text, this was the person that created that video, and this was the content that contained originally, right? Otherwise, it's very easy to copy, it's very easy for the AIs to replicate anything.
Yeah, I mean, where I see the problem coming in with this is videos that portray somebody doing something or saying something that they would never otherwise do. So you could, for example, fake create a security camera footage of you committing a crime. You would never authenticate that on any blockchain if it were true or not. You would always say that wasn't me. So if that's fake, you have a problem. And then that needs to be resolved. So current state of the art is that there are deep fakes, and there are also networks out there that can detect deep fakes. My personal opinion is that it is unfortunately an arms race that will be like cybersecurity, an ongoing battle between those trying to access deep fakes and those trying to detect them.
Yeah.
So I'll combine the several of the last questions together because they're more about the kinds of background and research and training you should have. One question is, how do data science, AI, and cloud programming help us in any of the algorithms? The second one, directed towards Patrick, where do you see the role or best use of the traditional software development business requirements analysts? in the AI development lifecycle? And another, what skills are the skills needed for AI? Do we need to be a very good programmer? We'll start with Miguel.
Yeah, so I think in a good AI team that solves well a problem, right? In many occasions, what we have is certainly a very skilled coder, right? So if there's a new problem, you want to use new algorithms, chances are that you're going to need a developer, somebody that makes sure that the code is clean, no bugs, and so on and so forth. You need somebody who's good at algorithms, who's good at, yeah, I think we need to use, this architecture, these LSTMs or these COPNETs or so on and so forth. So you need some sort of an algorithm expert. And then, as we said, we probably need for the complex problem, teaming up a domain expert that makes sure that these guys are not, are making the right use of the data and so on and so forth. And it really depends on what you want to be and your skills are, right? There's certainly, we train a lot of people and not everybody suited to code, right? We see that all the time. Not everybody wants to sit in front of a black screen and just fight with the code. Not everybody's wired like that, right? And if you do reinforcement learning, if you do some of the most complicated stuff, you're going to need to code, right? But I think there's space for algorithm experts, there's space for developers, right? And there's space for domain experts, right? Okay, so I think this good combination is what drives a good AI project. So you can, yeah.
Over time, I think the need for programmers, coders, is going down steadily. So there are, quite a few platforms out there that address the no-code scenario, where you can do quite a bit of AI and machine learning without writing any code. There are platforms out there like TensorFlow and PyTorch where you can get away with writing very, very little code in order to get something fairly good done. The work, I think, is shifting more and more away from coding machine learning and more to preparing the data for executing the machine learning algorithms that somebody else wrote and that you have access to. So that I think that's a shift that's going on. So less coding. Where does cloud computing fit in? Really, all that cloud provides you is a hardware infrastructure that you don't have to own. You can rent it. So there is really no relationship whatsoever between artificial intelligence and cloud computing. The only thing it offers you is rental hardware. You might as well purchase the hardware yourself. Of course, it is expensive. I think another question addressed the point that training AI systems is pricey. So for instance, the natural language system GPT-3 that was released a few days ago cost $4.6 million to train once. Yeah, so that's a cloud computing scenario right there. It's very expensive to do these things for large models or large databases. Of course, for most models, it will not be in the millions of dollars to train them, but for some examples, it is. So cloud computing is a double-edged sword. It allows you to rent the hardware, but you also pay for it several times more than it would cost you to purchase the hardware outright and have it in your own office building.
One additional question I think of interest. I've been working on this issue. The question is, what about AI? Putting it in accessibility features during implementation. Just generally, I find the notion of whether or not we're in a different era regarding thinking about accessibility, given the possibilities of customization and personalization, and how should we think about accessibility in this important time of development?
Yeah, so maybe the distinction is that I think in many projects, you just see that if you want to build a very large model, then it gets very pricey, right? So researchers and universities have a limit on researching, right? and we just hit the idea that you want to do a language model and you know it's going to cost you that, right? So in that sense, the knowledge might be democratized. The access to certain models, it's not, because it's very expensive. Only OpenAI or the large companies can spend that amount of time of money in a new model, right? So the large models, of course, are not democratized. The large models will be owned because it just requires a lot of TPU, GPU. It requires weeks of computing, right? And this is very expensive. So in that sense, yes, the large models are not going to be democratized because they're very expensive, right? They're very expensive. But the knowledge and yeah. So maybe that's and typically happens with language models. Language models are very hard, right, and very expensive to train, right?
Patrick?
Yes, I agree. In general, the accessibility is going down because as certain models get better and better, larger and larger, there's a financial entry point that is getting more and more expensive, that even for universities now, the language models are financially inaccessible, let alone for the individual person somewhere in the world trying to learn artificial intelligence, trying to do something on his or her own at home. These larger models are completely inaccessible. So you will then need to deal with smaller data sets and smaller models to gain your knowledge. And in terms of the university research, that's of course typically done on much smaller data sets. And the large models are then up to the corporates to do, who will then hopefully also find some way of leveraging that model to earn that money back. So OpenAI, with their millions spent just on the cloud computing, they will have to somehow be able to earn that back, which is of course why a lot of the progress in AI is very targeted towards commercial applications that can be monetized, which is one of the aspects that's holding the field back in a scientific sense. There's a lot of drive to make money because it's expensive. And again, that goes against the accessibility of the field.
So I see one last question. Most of the real-world AI projects fail, claim. Months of time, money, and effort goes in vain. Does this not take away the confidence in AI in the industry? And will there be a downturn eventually because of this? And that's our final.
Excellent question.
I personally think there's two sides of that, right? One is, if you see what asset managers and banks are doing, you'll see, right, there's no reason on why better algorithms shouldn't be doing better several things, right? So on that sense, but these are the quick wins, right? There are lots of quick wins, right, in terms of credit modeling, risk modeling, and so on and so forth, right? So that's on one side. But also, it has to be said, right, that many AI projects are research projects. You cannot expect research projects by having a super high rate of success. That would mean that you're literally inventing the wheel every day, and right. So whenever we had a breakthrough in AI, maybe deep learning, it came after decades of work. Somebody had a brilliant idea, had the computer power, had the courage and the luck to implement it. That doesn't happen every day, right? So research AI projects are hard. You have ideas, often they don't work, right? And so on. But large companies that have large data sets, that are doing analytics, reporting, I see no reason on why they should have lots of AIs failing, right? I don't see the reason. But research is about that, right? There's no question about that. So research is about trying lots of different architectures and algorithms and failing and changing the algorithm, tweaking and going back again, right? This is a science. This is, right, how science progresses. But I wouldn't say that's a huge rate of failure, right? It depends on in the rate of innovation and the hard and and if you're trying to solve a hard problem.
Yeah, so I have a nice experience on this, and this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, because I totally agree. I think something like 90, maybe 95% of projects are failures. So I again have a background in oil and gas and chemicals, and there we really see that a large number of these projects and do end up in a failure. And the reason is not AI, it's not machine learning. The reason is change management. So what you're going through is you're conducting a project where you're collecting this data, cleaning it, presenting it to the AI. You're going through the scientific exercise of doing artificial intelligence, making sure your models are accurate, presenting all that scientific evidence to, let's say, the board of directors of that company, that yes, you can do predictive maintenance, process optimization, diagnosing of defects or whatever. And then everybody celebrates your scientific achievement, but then comes the real crunch point where you're introducing this new system to a team of people that then have to use it, and they have to change their lifestyle. So think predictive maintenance. So far, the maintenance department was effectively reacting like a firefighting force to problems that develop. Now you're giving them predictive maintenance, which means they're getting advance warnings. They're going to have to plan their activities now. They need to proactively order spare parts before the failure happens. They need to completely change their lifestyle, something they've been doing for the last 50 years. And we're not talking about, two guys at a plumber's shop. We might be talking about a maintenance department of 2,000 people. So a very significant operation with this very significant asset footprint in the organization. And a lot of the times, one way or another, this organization will say no to your effort to introduce the system. It doesn't matter how scientifically accurate it is. We don't want to change the way we work. Or we don't trust it. We don't believe it. We can't do this or we can't do that. So what I've seen is that the primary number one obstacle to AI being actually used in real life problems has nothing to do with AI, but it's rather the management process of convincing a large number of people to actually use it, to trust it, and to change their lifestyle. Something, again, I referred to a couple of times now during COVID. We've been forced to use Zoom and stay at home. We've discovered that this is possible. Many of these other AI use cases are going through the same challenge of, we don't believe it, we don't want to do it, and only when you're absolutely forced to by a pandemic will you discover that, hey, guess what? The AI actually does its job.
There's one question that I missed when we were bundling together. If I can point it again to Patrick, where do you see the role or best use of the traditional software development business requirements analysts in the AI development lifecycle?
Oh yeah, good question. So depends what's meant by traditional. So the really traditional model is, of course, the waterfall model, where you gather requirements, you draw up a fairly detailed description of the end product, you get the programmers to go develop it. In the meantime, the customer has changed his opinion 3 times over, and the product 80% of the time fails, right? This is why Agile got invented, Scrum, Kanban, all these technologies or management styles. So within the AI lifecycle, I think you've definitely got to go Agile. A waterfall model is definitely misplaced. So if you're going to do Scrum or Kanban or anything like that, that will definitely be of tremendous benefit. In terms of analyzing the fundamental, let's call it business requirement and not so much IT requirement, that is, of course, the underpinning of such a project. You need to identify what exactly is the use case, what exactly is the business benefit of this, what is the interaction between the accuracy of the AI model I'm developing with the financial benefit in the business case, right? In some cases, it doesn't really matter how accurate it is. In other cases, like medical, it's absolutely pivotal how accurate your model has to be. And then that's a cycle, because the accuracy that you need translates back into what data you need, how much data you need, how good the data has to be to allow that accuracy to come about. And those are the principal things, I think, in terms of IT/business requirements that you need to collect. So it's less about the software functionality, and the requirements are much more to do with how accurate and fast you need the AI to be, and therefore what kind of data you need to be able to do that.
So thank you both for your insights, and very much appreciate your thoughts and comments. One thing that has been clear and agreed about throughout is that we are going through a major transformation and with COVID, and that both in the workplace and consumers and society and relationship within your job are all undergoing great change. So thanks very much for the opportunity to be part of this conversation.